Modernizing ocean freight shipping to optimize supply chains is the topic of my conversation today with Matt Marshall. He is Senior Vice President of NYSHEX. Hi, Matt.
Hey, how are you? Thanks for having me, Bob.
Good, and thanks for being with me. So tell me just as in general, what steps has the ocean freight industry taken these days to integrate technology and digitally transform itself?
It's a big question, especially over the last couple of years. I think there's a couple of things that we've seen so far. So if I think about the carrier side first, the carriers have, I think, invested a lot over the last couple of years in technology. You're seeing lots of online spot quote systems, whereas prior to that, it was very manual emails, phone calls, like those sorts of things for placing bookings. And then I think you've seen some interesting partnerships with companies like TradeLens, those sorts of things to like digitize the overall bill of lading experience, milestones, those sorts of things. And so I think you've seen carriers take some of the we'll say hefty profits over the last couple of years and really invest in digitizing their experience. And I think we'll continue to see that. And then I think on the shipper side or the software side of the industry, you've seen a lot of really interesting developments. I mean, visibility continues to be a huge trend. The P44s, the Four-Kites of the world continue to digitize and tell shippers where their goods are in transit. You've seen a lot of warehouse automation. I think there's a lot of interesting companies out there investing in warehousing automation. So you think about the labor shortages that we've experienced through COVID and those sorts of challenges. And so I think warehouse automation is going to be another interesting place where we continue to see investment. You've got companies trying to digitize the customs brokerage experience. And so I think kind of end-to-end supply chain, you're seeing a lot of digitization across the entire supply chain. Mm-hmm. And I think I expect to see that continue. The challenge is, in my opinion, how do all those things link together? Because you can digitize each individual experience, and I think trying to figure out how those things will link together will continue to be one of the biggest things for the industry.
Yeah, it's a lot of pieces of the puzzle. When it comes to tracking and visibility, however, that's nothing new in terms of ocean freight. Yeah. It's just that over the years, various companies have each introduced their own proprietary systems. Does that create problems that everyone has their own way of doing things?
It will be interesting to see. There's kind of two paths that I see this going down. Number one is everybody starts to share from a data perspective and create one standard of data. The second is somebody wins. And I think that second one is going to be very hard because there's so many providers at this point. It's very fragmented. I think it's going to be challenging to have one company that's out there today simply win the entire market to become the standard. Mm-hmm. But there's a lot of companies out there that are trying to solve the problem. So I agree with you, it's not a new problem, but the proliferation of providers I think will make it challenging.
Bottom line though, do you think this is all leading to increased reliability of supply chains, and if so, how?
Absolutely, right. I mean, if you think about what we were dealing with, and I didn't mention this earlier, but I spent the last 4.5 years at Flexport before I joined NYSHEX, really kind of like driving the track and trace visibility and digitization of the supply chain. Prior to that, you were dealing with spreadsheets, emails, faxes, phone calls, and so we've made a lot of progress in the last 7-8 years. And so I think we're going to continue to see that moving forward. And it will drive reliability. It has to. I mean, visibility drives planning, allows you to know where your things are. Now, when it's sitting in a vessel, one of 100 vessels off the port of LA, it's not as valuable. But as supply and demand rebalances and congestion rebalances, I think you're going to see a lot more reliability come out of it.
What's next to Digitize? I mean, you described at the beginning of this conversation the whole range of possibilities, the steps within the supply chain. Yeah. What's the big opportunity coming up next?
So I still think warehouse automation is going to be really interesting, especially with all of the labor challenges in the United States. And so, even things like, I was talking to somebody at a company out there, they're like a Series A startup, and basically what they're trying to do is automate the delivery process into the warehouse. There's a lot of discrepancies that happen in warehouses from truckers unloading and those sorts of things. And so they're trying to solve that problem, and I expect to see a lot of investment there. The second place that I expect to see a lot of digitization investment is really on the ocean freight contracting side of things. When I think about that, it's a problem that 2.5 years ago, prior to the pandemic, did not exist, or I should say it was not as painful. When there was always excess capacity in the ocean freight market, if your contract didn't perform, you could go out to the market, find spot capacity. My bet moving forward is you're not going to see that. I think the carriers know how to manage their fleets really well. I think they're going to continue to manage their capacity very well. And if that's the case, then you need your contracts to be able to perform. And really today, this stuff is managed in spreadsheets. It's managed in Excel, static data, those sorts of things. So I think there's going to be a lot of investment there. We're obviously making a bet there, but I think you're going to see more on the contract performance side of things, because if your contract has to perform in order to have reliability in the international component of your supply chain, you need some technology to support that process and take it out of Excel.
Again, in terms of the proprietary aspect of it though, you have these big collaborations between various shipping companies, all sharing space on the same vessel. So you would think that by nature that means they need to have essentially the same type of IT, the same type of automated contract technologies. Is that the case, or are they all different even though
they're really not the same? I mean, again, you've seen some, I mentioned TradeLens earlier, you've seen DCSA trying to standardize some data. So you've seen some companies that the carriers are investing in, but they all have their own systems. So even though they share vessels, they run their own systems internally that manage their contracts and their contract performance. And so you don't quite have that connectedness. And I don't know, honestly, that you will, because I think in a lot of cases, they view that as a strategic advantage, how they manage the commercial terms, those sorts of things of their agreements. And so anything that touches commercial, I think is always going to be separate.
Everything touches commercial. I mean, it's all business all the way across. Well, interesting opportunities certainly exist in digitization of ocean freight and the extended supply chain, but challenges also that you've described very well for us today, Matt Marshall. Thanks for that insight. But I want to turn just very quickly, tell me a little bit about NYSHEX today. Where do you guys fit into the picture?
Think of NYSHEX as a contracting technology and framework around ocean freight contracts. And so I mentioned earlier, we've made some bets on this continuing to be a path towards digitization. But basically think about us as digitizing from a time a contract is created, through execution of that contract, exception management, those sorts of things. That's all very manual today. And so we've built technology to streamline that process and digitize that process. And then later this year, we'll actually come out with an allocation management product for shippers. Again, this is a tool, or I should say a problem that really is quite new, where you have to manage all of your contracts in one place. And so for us, we're going to continue to invest in the contracting technology space, likely not the creation of the contract, but really the management of the contract. So you won't see us play in the milestone visibility, those sorts of things. There's plenty of players there, but we think that the contracting space has a need, and that's where we will continue to invest and play.
Another really important part of the puzzle, and you guys are doing a very important job there. Thanks so much, Matt. I really appreciate you talking about that.
All right.
I've been speaking with Matt Marshall of NYSHEX. Thank you very much for watching.